The Process, a podcast about creativity and experimental music. In the world of experimental music, outcomes and accolades for creators can be uncertain and at times seem far and few between. Therefore, creators and practitioners of experimental music must embrace the one thing they will always have complete control over: the process. This podcast aims to understand this creative process by listening to new works and discussing them with their creators. Each episode focuses on one creator and their music. Understanding how and why they create can inform aspiring creatives and help audiences better understand and navigate experimental music. I'm Dr. Doug Bielmeyer, and I'll be your host as we explore the world of experimental music, creativity, and the human need to find purpose in their world and lives. This is The Process. Hi, I'm Dr. Doug Bielmeyer. Welcome to The Process. Today is the last show of Season 3. So the show will take a brief hiatus until September. In September, Season 4 will begin, and I've already got some interviews lined up for that. Got some big ideas for Season 4, so look for that in September of 2022. Between now and then, or at any point, feel free to reach out to me about the show as being either maybe a possible guest and or contributing to the show in some way. Or maybe you just want to tell me that you hate the show, and if you do, I don't care. But if you like the show or have some ideas about other things or other people that I should cover, feel free to reach out. You can reach me at my email, which is dbielmeyer@gmail.com. That's D as in Doug, and then Bielmeyer, Bielmeier @gmail.com. Also, you can direct message me on any of the socials. I'd love to hear from you. Love to hear some of your thoughts, advice, or even desire to participate in the show, either as a guest or in another way. So, Season 4 is looking to be another great season of content, talking with creative people and creative musicians and how they create it and why they create it and how it all makes sense in their world and lives. But today's episode is a great place to take a brief pause at because it's definitely from a genre of music and a type of music that I'm intimately involved in, let alone experimental music, but also the world of electronic music and specifically guitar and effects. As you know, I perform on the lap steel and have written a bunch of compositions that are both electronic, just for fixed media, as well as for acoustic instruments. And today's guest is no different. Jay Sorce. You may know him from a lot of the performing he does as a guitarist, both classical guitarist and electric guitarist. You may know him from groups such as Hypercube as well as some of the other performance ensembles he's in. But I think today's conversation is really interesting because he talks a lot about how the guitar itself is a musical instrument, but all the effects and the pedals that go with it are also an instrument, and definitely something that needs to be mastered or perfected prior to stepping on a stage or getting in front of people and performing. He mentions that everything could just stop and the whole thing could just crash. And anybody that's ever performed with a laptop or any other computer systems or even effects can understand that struggle. I think it's probably happened to you. So without further ado, let's take a listen to Copper and then learn more about Jay. A guitarist noted for his unique blend of refinement, intensity, and virtuosic technique, Jay Sorce has performed nationally and internationally as soloist and chamber musician. Jay is a founding member of the Hypercube Ensemble and the Source Lodge Duo. Jay is committed to expanding the role of guitar as a chamber instrument and champions the music of living composers. Jay's creative work focuses on music for electric guitar and effects. In addition to solo works, Jay's collaborative projects include a duo with electronic musician Drake Anderson. Their album Fossil Record was released in 2021, and the electric guitar duo project with Nicholas Deo, Kill Dry. They released Stretch the Sky in 2022 and have a double album, The Pool of the Black Star, being prepared for release. On today's episode, we listen to one of Jay's guitar and effects compositions, Copper.
Ever since I picked up a guitar, it's been a creative thing. And sometimes it can be an issue because you sit down, you have to practice, you have a gig or whatever, and an hour later you're still kind of messing around and making stuff up. All of the stuff that I do creatively is with the guitar. I grew up playing electric guitar. I got away from it playing classical guitar for a long time. Still, of course, creating stuff all the time and composing stuff. Although getting back into electric guitar sort of excited me because, of course, it comes with all the effects. And, that was something I've always loved and have messed around with on and off for, since I was a teenager.
Do you remember, sorry to interrupt you, do you remember the first pedal you bought? Do you remember what it was? What was the gateway to now having, I know you now have just a floor full of pedals, but what was the first one? Do you remember?
I mean, I've had, when you're a kid, you would have loved to have all these pedals, but you're broke, and so I had, whatever I sort of bartered and traded for, which was usually some junk. But the first really cool pedal that I had was a Boss loop station. And that's kind of ties back into sort of what I'm doing now. So I had a really cheap Ibanez delay pedal and that Boss loop station. And that was like, endless fascination.
What couldn't you do? What couldn't you do?
Yeah, really. And that's kind of, that's been the seed of everything that I do now with effects is, it can be sort of summed up simply with like very sort of elaborate looping mechanisms and layers and using those devices as sort of like a sound world building machine, essentially. Right?
So do you find you're inspired by guitar ideas or just by improvising, or is it extra musical things that are inspiring you to kind of sit down in front of the guitar and the pedals?
All of the above, really. But I think whether consciously or not, the ideas come through the guitar. That's like, and never get tired of the sounds that the guitar makes. And it's still, someone said at some point that the guitar is the like the most sophisticated electroacoustic musical interface. Because it has the touch and feel and the interactive nuance of a acoustic instrument in many ways. And then it becomes part of the ecosystem of the effects. And the perfect example, of course, is feedback, but the sounds are affecting the instrument. The instrument is affecting the sounds. I think through my fingers and my ears. It's the more connected I get to the guitar, the more I'm hearing. I never get tired of having a guitar in my
Right.
hands. I'm
Well,
like obsessed,
the possibilities are endless, right? Yeah.
Right.
And, one thing I was thinking about though, too, can it be overwhelming sometimes? Because, we talk about guitar being this acoustic instrument, but then also, like you mentioned, electroacoustic with all the pedals and all the effects. But there's a lot of history of electric guitar.
Yeah.
And some of it is very cool. Some of it is very specific. Maybe that's, instead of saying lame, I was saying
Yeah.
specific, like to a very certain style. So do you ever find yourself, sometimes limited because of that history of, well, I can't use delay and chorus because then it's 80s guitar, or I can't,
Yes.
now it's a blues guitar. Do you ever find yourself, is that limiting you sometimes?
100%. Yeah, 100%. Well, I think, and every instrument has this sort of connotations, that immediate,
Yes.
like, you play a chord and it's like, oh, Beatles. I recognize that, that's a thing. And that's another thing about, the effects that can be really, you're taking it one step removed from sort of historic connections and those sort of immediate, connotations. But I guess, every instrument has that to some degree or another. Guitar, maybe more so because it's in every popular music, and just sort of that sound is so in our ears,
But you're right. Like the violin has tropes. There's all these
Exactly.
like musical cliches and things. So there's history.
Like a purely clean guitar, it's really tricky, I think, to write something that doesn't have those connotations and doesn't immediately sort of pull you out and remind you of that. So I'm thinking of that actually quite actively.
And it's interesting too, because I think just the average listener too is so sensitive to, like, if you're using both the pickups, one of the pickups, like if what your tone is, like, I think because there's just so much, commercial and popular history of guitar, that electric guitar, that, just changing your tone knob, people are like, oh, well, now that's this and it's not this and it's that. And I don't know, maybe I'm just getting anxiety thinking about the limitations. But
I guess it's probably not quite so, like overtly thought about, because a lot of times you can't avoid it altogether anyway. B, there's the sounds that probably have just as much of a loaded like connotation, but I like them. So I use, you start to, sort of collect the sounds that, for better or worse, those are the sounds that I like and I gravitate towards. They tend to be more heavily affected, so I put layers of reverb and I put, layers of delay and loops.
We might not recognize them as guitar right away.
Yes.
Initially.
Exactly. Well, and certainly, like, once you start using volume swells and you start removing the attack, and you can remove it pretty quickly from at least the acoustic sounding guitar, right?
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure.
I guess in a larger framework, I've been kind of thinking about this series of pieces, and I come back to it periodically. It's not like I'm constantly working on it, but the sort of general idea is associating each piece with a different color.
Yeah.
And I guess loosely because the first one of them is called charcoal. That was the first one that I did. And this one is called copper, which I guess are loosely colors, and then I have another one's cut sky blue.
Is it like a synesthesia thing, or is it's looser than that? It's
very loose. It's very loose. Although at least for me, it makes those titles make perfect sense when you hear it. It somehow, on some level, they make sense, but it's definitely not any sort of programmatic thing or anything like that.
Right. Yeah.
I think maybe on the most basic level, it's called copper because it has this metallic kind of quality to it, right? And that thread runs through the whole piece and
kind of browns and oranges. And
that's as deeply as the title goes. But it was one of these things where, like I said, so I was working on the material and at one point I'm like, okay, like the word copper popped into my head and I'm like, yeah, that sort of fits perfect. That's great. And then maybe the opposite happens, which is like, okay, now I have this thing called copper, and that also directs where the rest of the piece goes. So it kind of feeds back into itself. Mm-hmm. But I guess there was two basic things that are pretty major elements in the piece that kind of sparked the whole thing. And the first one is just that opening chord. It has like this long, slow, sort of pulsing quality to it.
Yeah.
And I really liked, and essentially, so what that is a very slow harmonic tremolo. So if you take a harmonic tremolo, which divides the higher frequencies and the lower frequencies, and so it has the tremolo thing, but it's affecting the different frequencies at different rates. And I put that at the absolute slowest thing. It was just a kind of happy coincidence. I attached this little expression slider to the pedal, and it allowed me then to go even slower than the knob. Wow. Okay. And I heard that, and I played this chord, and I just loved that the overtones are kind of blooming out of it, and it was just so that idea. Okay, I just got to sit with that for a while, and you play, and you're just not getting tired of hearing it. So okay, I'm using that,
But linked with the pedal, then you could change the rate of the tremolo then as well, right? So
that's right.
I think throughout the piece I heard it, speeding up and slowing down, but you're saying it's also linked then to the frequencies. So as you're speeding up and slowing it down, different frequencies are having this tremolo on them.
Exactly right. Yeah. So and in fact, if you're looking in the video, there's a little white pedal with the slider on it, and I'm adjusting the tremolo rate as the piece goes. And it, a fast tremolo and this slow undulating thing are like, might as well be different effects, right? So, so that was like a real starting point. And then there's another effect that I found. It's called the multi-resonator, and it's actually like a modular synth thing. There's a brand called Mutable Instruments, and they do this, and it's that. So that's included in one of the pedals that I have, and I don't know exactly the technology behind it, but it's essentially it's like modeling physical instruments, and then you can play with like how those instruments are resonating. So the physical model that this one was based on is a coil spring. So essentially you're like feeding your sound through the coil spring, and then you can control, the damping. So if it's less damp, you can get these great like feedback moments, the brightness, and you can really interact as if the sound is literally going through a spring, and and of course like the metallic and all the overtones and like the multiphonics that are in like a kind of a rusty piece of metal. So
well, I think it was so appropriate because, in a lot of some of those older amps, they have the spring reverb in them. And, the classic sound of somebody knocking over an amp and hearing that kind of, which we try not to do, right?
Yeah,
but
right.
It happens.
But it is one of the great sounds.
Oh, yeah. And it's just, so it's this shaking, this vibrating. And I heard that throughout the piece as well. This sort of, kind of organic sort of shaking, but metal, And then I guess leads into the copper as well. I don't know if it's a copper
Absolutely.
coil.
Well, yeah. I mean, it all starts to. It's like, I mean,
right.
Are springs even made of copper? I don't know.
Who knows? You're asking the wrong people. Right?
Yeah. But they all sort of they're all sort of pointing towards like this metallic quality, and so it just made sense. And the one thing leads into the other. My musical career, my music life is, it really like, it's these two things. It's the performing, concert playing, playing other people's music part of my life, which is probably the more like visible part of my stuff. And then there's my creative work, which time-wise probably I'm spending maybe a lot more time doing this, my creative stuff. But it's like I said, it's a lot of times I'm doing it for my own.
Right. Which is important. I think, doing like composing as a therapeutic process or as a personal enjoyment thing. I think that's still really important and valid.
Yeah, I agree. Absolutely. And I guess also there's an element of it, the pedals are an instrument and you're developing skill with the instrument. And a lot of it, I really feel that way. And getting to the point now where I feel like now that instrument, I'm like up to the level now where I'm like ready to share it with, the world or ready to and haven't done a ton of it, but like playing concerts and doing improvisations, in front of a live audience. And pedals are touchy like that. I mean,
absolutely.
If you're not really completely in control, they can sort of run away with you, or suddenly the sound stops and you're stuck, so getting that skill level up to where I'm happy with it. But all that aside is to say that there's the part of my life where I am getting paid for my musical services, and then there's the creative work that I'm primarily am not.
So you're working and you're playing gigs, you're playing other people's music. You're playing standard rep, for guitar. And then you have your own stuff. And I love this idea too, that the pedals are an instrument too, and that's something that you have to practice and train to become effective with those. And, I always try to remind myself that when I see somebody doing some type of technical, either working with a laptop or working with pedals, I have to remind myself how much time they took to be able to just pull that off live, let alone just pull it off, but pull it off live and like you said, not have just like the music stop, so is your goal as a creator to kind of merge those two things, or?
I think I'm fine with having two worlds. And if I think they're both sort of go to different places on their own. I think where I'm heading with this particular world, the guitar and effects world, is like I said, I think I'm heading towards feeling comfortable bringing it out publicly and getting on stage and doing it. And that's more of a recent thing. I mean, partially because I've been doing it so much. I mean, the pandemic, for all its ups and downs, gave me a lot of time to just do this. And I did put a lot of time into it. And so you really know your setup in and out, and to get to a point where you feel like you can improvise and not just be rehashing, but really like going new places, but also having that element of control where it's not going to explode, right? So, and that's something that I'm doing more and more in variety of ways, improvisation and sort of performance. But I think that's where this is going, and I'd love to be doing more of it. Actually, I think that's the next step, is to sort of pursue opportunities to do it live.
So it's an evolution. It's an evolution of what you're doing, and you get. I think that's with technology too. We get to certain walls, and we're like, okay, but what? I want to do this now. How can I do that? And
exactly.
Sure enough, somebody on the internet is making a pedal somewhere, or you can build yourself, right? And
that's right. Yeah. I mean, it's that exact fortunate like timing where. You might have to wait decades. I don't know.
I feel like some of the electronic composers, like in the 60s and 70s, like waiting for a computer computational process to be fast enough to do some of the things
just
they
like
want to do.
It's not better to be decades ahead of your time.
right. Yeah. Well, Jay, this has been fantastic talking to you. Definitely for any of our techier or nerdier listeners, they'll have loved this episode. As sure as everyone else will. Before I let you go, can you tell us a little bit about where we can find out more about you and your music?
Sure. Yeah. I have a website. It's jaysorce.com. I also have some of my recent projects available on Bandcamp and iTunes. The project with Nicholas Deo is called Kill Dry. Yep. We have an album that we just released in January, as well as a double album coming out in next fall. As well, I have an album with the electronic musician Drake Anderson. That's called Fossil Record. That's also available on Bandcamp and iTunes. Awesome. And all the links for that are on my website.
Thanks to Jay for sharing his time and music with us. If you enjoyed this episode, please check out other episodes in the series. And as always, like, subscribe, or leave a comment on your preferred podcasting app. I'm Dr. Doug Bielmeyer, and this has been The Process.